the AlmaLinux Engineering Steering Committee. They have the right to ship on their own timeline, because the GPL gives them that right. They exercised it. Now consider this. 90% of the world's top 500 supercomputers run Linux. So do the GPU clusters running the model weights behind every AI product your organization depends on. Linux is the substrate. The kernel is open. The model is usually not. When the vendor behind your AI platform defers a fix, you have no ALESCo, no fork right, no community steering committee with the authority to override the roadmap. You are on the vendor's timeline. How many AI platforms in your stack have no community governance at all?
Let's get into it.
In August 1955, 17 IBM customers met in Santa Monica and decided to share their code rather than rewrite it. 70 years later, a Linux Foundation committee made the same choice on a live production kernel. This is the Hamberger Report. I'm Andreas Hamberger, Enterprise Architect, Wellington. In August 1955, 17 IBM customers met in Santa Monica and decided to share their code rather than rewrite it. 70 years later, a Linux Foundation committee made the same choice on a live production kernel. This is the Hamberger Report. I'm Andreas Hamberger, Enterprise Architect, Wellington. On 26 May 2026, AlmaLinux shipped 2 stable releases on the same day, 9.8 and 10.2. The first same-day dual stable release in the project's history. The engineering achievement was real, but the Governance Act was more interesting than the engineering. AlmaLinux 9.8 included a kernel backport that the ALESCo committee had voted to approve ahead of upstream availability. The fix addressed excessive CPU consumption during task cleanup. Upstream deferred it. The community shipped it anyway. AlmaLinux 9.8 included a kernel backport that the AlmaLinux Engineering Steering Committee, ALESCo, had voted to approve ahead of upstream availability. The fix addressed excessive CPU consumption during systemed and PS task cleanup. The community had submitted it to CentOS Stream 9. Inclusion was deferred to at least RHEL 9.9. ALESCo reviewed the deferral, reviewed its users, and put the fix in 9.8 immediately. The release announcement put it plainly. If you have been seeing that CPU spike during task cleanup, it is fixed today rather than a quarter from now. That sentence is the entire Linux governance argument in one line. Not we have submitted to upstream and are awaiting approval. Not the vendor's roadmap will address this in a future release. A committee accountable to the user community exercised independent release authority on a timeline accountable to the user community. Linus Torvalds' Usenet post in August 1991 was a release authority declaration. He was not submitting a patch to 8.T and waiting for approval. He was releasing code directly to the people who wanted it on a timeline he controlled. Linus Torvalds' Usenet post on 25th August 1991 was, among other things, a release authority declaration. He was not submitting a patch to AT&T's Unix source tree and waiting for approval. He was releasing code directly to the people who wanted it, on a timeline he controlled, on the terms that preserved their right to do the same. The GPL codified this in 1992. The license was not primarily about the right to read the code, though it guaranteed that too. It was about the right to ship. This structural guarantee is what made Eric Raymond's bazaar model possible at all. Release early, release often, treat your users as co-developers. What Raymond was describing in governance terms was a system where release authority was distributed in parallel rather than centralized and sequential. Nobody had to wait for permission to ship a beta version. The GPU clusters running the model weights that power modern AI all run Linux, not a coincidence. It is the same structural outcome that gave Linux 100% of the world's top 500 supercomputers and above 90% of cloud compute. The GPU clusters running the model weights that power modern AI all run Linux, not a coincidence. It is the same structural outcome that gave Linux 100% of the world's top 500 supercomputers and above 90% of cloud compute. When building the most demanding infrastructure, you choose the substrate you can inspect, modify, and ship on your own timeline. But the governance question has not migrated cleanly. The kernel is open. The model is usually not. The open source initiative's open source AI definition requires open weights, open training data, and open training code. The list of models that genuinely pass all three layers is short. Most of what is marketed as open is open washing, the AI equivalent of calling software free while restricting the right to fork. When your AI upstream is a closed weight model controlled by a vendor with no community steering committee, you cannot exercise release authority. The ALESCo Governance Act is simply not available to you. Lethal by Design launches here on the 26th of June every Friday. If you are following this governance arcs, subscribe now so you do not miss the launch. Governments and defense organizations understood this problem before most enterprises did. The United States Department of Defense has required open source consideration in acquisition decisions since DoD 8500.2 on the basis that you cannot assure software you cannot inspect. Governments and defense organizations understood this problem before most enterprises did. The United States Department of Defense Information Assurance Guidance has required open source consideration in acquisition decisions since DoD 8500.2 on the basis that you cannot assure software you cannot inspect. United States Executive Order 14028 introduced software bills of materials requirements in 2021. Organizations operating critical infrastructure must be able to verify the composition of their stack. For Five Eyes defense procurement, the structural logic applies without modification. A model weight is software. If you cannot inspect the training methodology, cannot fork the weights, and cannot override the vendor's release decision, your assurance posture is weaker than what the United States Department of Defense required of commercial software vendors in the early 2000s. The ALESCo backport decision is the distribution layer expression of the same principle. Assurance requires the ability to see and change what ships. Where you cannot exercise that right, you are not truly operating the infrastructure. The vendor is, and you are paying for the privilege. The AlmaLinux dual release is a small event in the long arc of Linux governance. No one at a boardroom table in Auckland or Wellington will have noticed, but the pattern it expresses has been the structural advantage of open source infrastructure for 35 years. The AlmaLinux May 2026 dual release is a small event in the long arc of Linux governance. No one at the boardroom table in Auckland or Wellington will have noticed, but the pattern it expresses, community governance exercising independent release authority for the benefit of users, has been the structural advantage of open source infrastructure for 35 years. If the model your organization depends on has no steering committee, no fork right, and no published release criteria, your platform dependency is not managed by community governance. It is managed by a vendor's product roadmap. That is a governance posture, not a technology choice, and it is worth naming as such. The Linux community named it in 1991 and spent 3 decades building the infrastructure to exercise it. The AI community is at the equivalent of 1993, still working out what governance structures are necessary and whether the GPL has an analog that applies at the model layer. At your last infrastructure decision, a platform upgrade, a model selection, a security patch, who actually held release authority? A community, a vendor, or you? At your last infrastructure decision, a platform upgrade, a model selection, a security patch, who actually held release authority? A community, a vendor, or you? 32 years of watching Linux ship has taught me that the most interesting decisions are never about the code. They are about who has the authority to put it in front of users. The AlmaLinux Engineering Steering Committee exercised that authority for its users on 26 May 2026. The AI community has not yet built that infrastructure. The ALESCo vote on a systemd CPU fix is in that context not a minor release note. It is a proof of concept. Community governance at the distribution layer still works, still ships, and still puts user interests ahead of vendor timelines. Whether the same infrastructure can be built in time at the model layer is the governance question this series will return to. I'm Andreas Hamberger. This is the Hamberger Report. Linux Wednesday, every week.
That is the Hamberger Report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.
Like and subscribe.